Picture this: 456 people wake up on the floor of an enormous concrete room, wearing matching numbered tracksuits, with no memory of how they got there. Masked guards line the walls, and then, above their heads, a giant transparent sphere descends from the ceiling, and money starts pouring into it. Real money, bundles of it, falling like rain, and the number on the wall climbs, and every single person in that room does the same thing at the same time. They look up, and they stop being afraid, because for the first time in years they can see a way out. And every single one of us watching does the exact same thing they did. We look at the money. Almost nobody watches that scene and asks the question this video is about to make impossible to unask, which is, who is paying for all of this? Not the prize. The prize is the easy part. Who is paying for the island? The arenas? The hundreds of masked staff? The custom-built sets that get used once and destroyed? Because behind that beautiful, horrifying sphere of cash is one of the most expensive private operations ever put on screen, run in total secrecy, with no visible customers, no legal existence, and an annual budget that would embarrass a mid-sized corporation. So today, we're going to do what nobody inside that world ever does out loud. We're going to run the numbers. We're going to price out the entire operation, from the island to the staff to that sphere of cash. And by the end, you're going to understand something genuinely disturbing: the prize money, the thing the whole show revolves around, the thing every player is willing to die for, is not the biggest cost. It isn't even close. And the way that prize is funded is the single most brutal business model ever written into fiction. So let's do what we always do. Let's start at zero, and let's build this entire operation from nothing, one line item at a time. First, the venue. And there's no getting around it. You need an island. Not a metaphorical one. An actual, private, remote island. Far enough from any coastline that no one hears anything. Big enough to hold a facility the size of a small airport. And legally invisible. In the real world, private islands do sell, and the price range is enormous. But a genuinely remote island large enough for an industrial complex, with deep water access for boat transport, runs anywhere from $10 million to well over 100. And that's just the dirt. You're buying it through shell companies, because the one thing you cannot afford is a paper trail leading to a name. Call the island and the ownership structure $50 million. Add it to the total. $50 million, and there's nothing on it yet but rocks. Now you build the facility, and this is where the number stops being a real estate purchase and becomes a construction mega project. Because what's on that island is not a building, it's a self-contained secret city. You need a dormitory that holds 456 people, with beds stacked to the ceiling, plus bathrooms, plus a kitchen that can feed all of them. You need housing and facilities for hundreds of staff, separately, so the two populations never mix. You need a control room with a wall of monitors covering every square meter of the complex. You need medical facilities. You need a morgue and an incinerator. And let's be honest about that, because it's a real line item with a real cost. You need power generation, because you are not on a grid. You need water treatment. You need food storage for hundreds of people for a week with no resupply. And every single bit of it has to be built by contractors who never speak about it. And then, on top of all that, you build the arenas. And the arenas are the truly insane part, because they aren't rooms. They're film sets at industrial scale. An outdoor field the size of a stadium with a fake sky painted over it. An entire mock village built indoors. A vast staircase maze in impossible colors. A tug-of-war platform suspended dozens of meters in the air. A bridge made of hundreds of custom glass panels, half of them engineered to break. Each of these is a one-off, purpose-built, single-use construction. And in the real world, building sets of that ambition costs millions each, before you count the engineering required to make them safely lethal, which is a sentence I hate writing but is exactly the design brief. A secret self-sufficient complex plus a half-dozen stadium-scale custom arenas is, conservatively, a $300 million construction project. And unlike a normal build, you cannot hire the cheapest bidder, you cannot get permits, you cannot insure it, and you have to pay an enormous premium for silence at every level. Add it to the total, $350 million, and not one player has arrived yet. And it's worth pausing on those arenas, because they represent a category of spending that would terrify any real chief financial officer. Single-use capital expenditure. Think about what that means. A normal business builds a factory and runs it for 30 years, spreading the cost across everything it ever produces. This operation builds a stadium-sized glass bridge, uses it for approximately 4 minutes, and then it is worthless. The mock village, the giant staircase, the field with the painted sky, each one is a multi-million-dollar asset with a useful life measured in a single afternoon. And because the games have to change to stay unpredictable, you cannot even reuse them next season. You are, in accounting terms, buying a building and demolishing it before lunch, then doing it again 5 more times. There is almost nothing in the legitimate economy that behaves like this. The closest real-world comparison is a film production or a World's Fair pavilion, things that are explicitly temporary and are still famous for being ruinously expensive. Except a film set doesn't need to physically survive hundreds of people running across it, and a fair pavilion isn't engineered to fail on command. This operation is paying blockbuster movie construction prices for structures that must also perform like industrial machinery, and then throwing them away. That single line, more than the payroll, more than the prize, is why the annual number is so brutal. And there's a strategic question hiding underneath all of this, which is, how big is this thing, really? Because the story quietly tells you that this island is not the only one. Other countries run their own versions, which means we are not pricing a business at all. We are pricing a single franchise location. Think about the tiers. At the bottom, you could imagine a small, cheap version. A warehouse, a few dozen players, minimal staff, crude games, nasty, low overhead, low prestige, and low revenue. Because the clientele you're selling to are billionaires, and billionaires do not fly across the world for a warehouse. In the middle sits the operation we're actually pricing. The full island, hundreds of players, purpose-built arenas, a global recruiting arm, and a broadcast-quality production. And at the top is the thing the ending implies: an international organization, multiple facilities, shared systems, standardized rules, a permanent management class, and a client list spanning continents. That top tier changes the economics completely, and in the direction you'd expect from any franchise. The recruiting methods, the game designs, the mask hierarchy, the operational playbook, all of it can be developed once and deployed everywhere, which is exactly why real franchises exist. The horrifying implication of the story isn't that one rich man built one island. It's that somebody built a scalable, exportable, repeatable business model and then rolled it out internationally because it worked. Now, the staff. And here's where people massively underestimate the operation, because the masked workers aren't extras. They're the entire company. Count what's actually needed. You have the masked floor staff who manage the players, dozens of them, armed, on rotation. You have the ones who handle the bodies. You have the ones who cook and clean. You have technicians running the lights, the cameras, the doors, the sound, an entire broadcast-grade production crew, because this whole thing is being filmed and streamed live to an audience. You have the recruiters out in the world, quietly identifying desperate people and testing them. You have the drivers and the boat crews. You have medical staff. And you have management sitting above all of it. Realistically, this is several hundred employees, and every single one of them has to be paid enough to never, ever talk for the rest of their lives. That's not a normal salary. In the real world, hazard pay plus a total secrecy premium, plus the fact that they're committing serious crimes, means you are paying multiples of a normal wage. Call the average all-in cost per staff member $200,000 a year, and with a few hundred of them, the annual payroll alone lands somewhere around $40 to $60 million a year. Add year one's payroll to the total, we're at $400 million. Then the operations, the boring stuff that keeps a secret city breathing, feeding 456 players and several hundred staff, transporting hundreds of unconscious people to and from an island without anyone noticing, which requires vehicles, boats, and probably aircraft, fuel for the generators, medical supplies, the uniforms, the equipment, the maintenance, and the disposal, which is its own grim logistics operation. Call the annual running cost another $10 million, easily. Add it to the total, $410 million. And now, finally, we get to the money everyone actually came for, the prize. 45.6 billion won, which in real money is roughly $35 million. Add it to the total, $445 million to run a single season. And now stop and look at that number, because there's something wrong with it, and it's the whole point of this video. The prize is $35 million. The operation costs $410 million. The thing the entire story is about, the sphere of cash that 456 people are willing to die for, The number that hypnotizes every player and every viewer is less than 10% of the budget. The prize isn't the expense, the prize is the marketing. It's the smallest line on the whole invoice, and it's the only one anybody ever looks at. But that's not even the disturbing part. The disturbing part is where the prize money comes from, because the organizers don't fund it. Not really. The rule is stated openly at the start. Every player who is eliminated adds 100 million won to the pot. That's about $75,000 per person. The sphere doesn't fill up because someone is generous. It fills up because people are dying, and the players can see it happening in real time, above their heads, as it happens. Sit with the economics of that for a second, because it is genuinely one of the most vicious business designs ever written. The prize is funded by the losses. The product and the payment are the same people. The organizers don't have to put up $35 million, they have to put up a promise, and then the contestants generate the prize themselves by being eliminated. In accounting terms, the single largest visible cost of the entire enterprise is paid for by the enterprise's own raw material, consuming itself, on camera. And it does something even smarter, which is why it's the true engine of the whole design. That growing number is not a payout mechanism, it's a motivational device. It is there so that every surviving player watches the value of their own survival increase every time someone else dies, which converts grief into greed, and turns 456 victims into willing participants who vote, over and over, to keep the game running. The organizers didn't just build a cheap prize structure, they built a machine that makes the prisoners guard themselves. That's not a budget line. That's the most effective piece of workforce management in the history of fiction, and it costs nothing. Okay? So if the prize is small and the costs are enormous, the obvious question is the one that breaks most fictional evil empires. How does this thing make money? Who is actually paying $410 million a year, and why? And here the story gives you a clean answer, and it's the answer that turns the whole thing from a horror story into a business. The VIPs. A small number of extraordinarily wealthy people fly in secret, to watch and to bet. And that is the actual company. Everything else, the island, the games, the tracksuits, the sphere, is production cost for a gambling product sold to a handful of billionaires. The players think they're contestants. They're not. They're the inventory. The real customer never sets foot on the game floor, wears a mask, watches from a lounge, and wagers sums that make the entire prize pool look like pocket change. And once you see that, the economics finally close. A high-roller gambling operation with a few ultra-wealthy clients betting on unlimited stakes outcomes could absolutely generate the handle needed to cover $400 million a year. It's not a charity, it's not a social experiment, and it's not really even about the players. It's a very small, very exclusive casino, and the games are the sport, and the human beings are the horses. So the business model, stated plainly, is this. The house builds an expensive arena, sources its athletes for free from the ranks of the desperate, funds the visible prize out of the athlete's own losses, and sells the spectacle to a tiny number of clients with more money than conscience. Every input that a normal business would have to pay for has been engineered to be free. Now the hidden costs, because even a machine this elegant has a list. Hidden cost number 1, recruitment. You cannot advertise this. There is no job posting. So you need a permanent, ongoing, worldwide talent acquisition operation, running all year, whose only job is to find people who are in enough debt and enough despair to say yes. That's a real, funded department with real salaries, doing patient, careful work, testing candidates, verifying their desperation, and making the approach. In business terms, it's the strangest sales team ever assembled, and its product is an invitation. Hidden cost number 2, secrecy. And the fact that secrecy has no economies of scale. Every additional person who knows is a permanent liability. Every contractor who built an arena, every boat crew, every recruiter, every guard is a leak risk forever, not just this year. The cost of maintaining silence doesn't fall over time, it compounds, because the number of people who could destroy you only ever grows. Most criminal enterprises die of this exact problem, and it's the one cost you can never optimize away. Hidden cost number 3, and this one is a genuine business problem hiding in plain sight. Internal fraud. The staff, poorly supervised, hidden behind masks, sitting on a facility full of bodies, start running a side operation of their own, harvesting and selling organs for personal profit. Read that as a manager instead of a viewer, and it's a textbook case. An organization so obsessed with external secrecy that it fails to police itself, whose own employees quietly monetize company assets on the side. It corrupts the games, it compromises security, and it happens precisely because the whole enterprise is built on the assumption that nobody inside will ever talk. The most dangerous threat to the operation wasn't a player or a detective. It was middle management stealing inventory. Hidden cost number 4, the winner. Because if somebody survives, you have to actually pay. And that means moving $35 million to a private individual, cleanly, without a trace, into the real banking system. That is a serious money laundering exercise. And in the real world, moving that kind of money invisibly costs a meaningful percentage of it. The single most expensive outcome for the organizers is the one the audience is rooting for. So let's be realistic, like we always are, and put one bad year into the story. Because an operation like this is one leak away from ending. A survivor who talks, a detective who gets aboard, a contractor with a conscience. In a genuinely bad year, you're abandoning a compromised island, building a new facility somewhere else, and buying an enormous amount of silence. That's a several $100 million event, and the entire history of organized crime says it's not a question of if. So let's run the numbers properly. Optimistic versus realistic, like we always do. The optimistic operator builds the island and the arenas once, reuses the facility for many years, keeps the annual burn to roughly $85 million for staff, operations, and prize, and never gets caught. Over a decade, that's the $350 million build, plus around $850 million in running costs. Call the optimistic decade $1.2 billion, comfortably funded by VIP betting with a very healthy margin. But we deal in realistic. And realistically, arenas get redesigned every season because the games change, security has to be rebuilt after every close call, staff must be replaced, silence must be repurchased, and at least once you burn an entire facility and start again somewhere else. Fold that in, and the true cost of running this operation across a decade lands somewhere around $2 billion. Add it to the total, $2 billion. That's our number, to run a game. And now put that next to the thing that started it, because this is the part that reframes the entire show. $2 billion of island, concrete, payroll, and secrecy. And the raw material, the one input the whole machine cannot function without, the 456 human beings, cost the organizers absolutely nothing. They weren't kidnapped off the street for a fee. They weren't bought, they were invited, and they said yes. And then, crucially, after seeing exactly what the game was, a majority of them voted to come back. That's the real engine, not the money, the volunteers. So the money question is settled, which leaves the real question, the one the show is actually asking underneath all the tracksuits and the giant sphere of cash. Why was the most expensive part free? And the answer is the entire point. And it's why this story landed the way it did all over the world. The organizers did not create 456 desperate people. They didn't have to. Those people were already there, produced at no cost by an ordinary economy, crushing personal debt, medical bills that outrun a lifetime of wages, businesses that collapsed, gambling losses, immigration status with no way forward, elderly people with nothing left. Every single contestant walked into that room carrying a financial situation that already felt like a death sentence, and the game simply offered them a faster, louder version of the same bet with better odds. That's the horror. And it's an economic horror, not a physical one. The organizers didn't manufacture the despair. They noticed it was lying around unused, and they built a business on top of it. Desperation was the free input. The cheapest raw material on Earth is a person with nothing left to lose, and there is an effectively unlimited supply, replenished every year, at no cost to anyone, by a world that produces it as a byproduct. $2 billion for the island, the arenas, the guards, and the silence. $0 for the only thing that actually made it work. So the next time you watch that sphere fill with money, and the number climbs, and everyone in the room looks up, don't look at the prize. Look at the invoice behind it. Look at the $400 million of concrete and payroll it took to build a room where $35 million could look like salvation. And then, look at the one line on the whole balance sheet that reads 0. And remember that it wasn't 0 because the organizers were clever. It was 0 because we handed it to them for free. Thanks for watching. If you want to see another impossible operation priced out to the last coin, the video on running an entire chocolate factory with a workforce nobody pays is right over there, and the parallels are not an accident. See you in the next one.